The queen roared, "Did you know my daughter is expecting, human?" Then everyone shouted, "King!" Part 5. The crown reshaped. The great hall was still, the kind of stillness that comes not from emptiness, but from a room full of people who are afraid to breathe. Hundreds of Valaris stood in perfect silence, their golden eyes locked on the scene before them. The queen had lowered her blade. The princess stood beside the human, and for the first time in the history of the Valari Empire, no one knew what would happen next. Queen Yuna stood at the center of it all, taller than everyone, more powerful than anyone, and yet somehow looking more human than she ever had before. Her armor caught the light, and her crown seemed heavier on her head than it had been an hour ago. She had spent centuries ruling with an iron hand, and now, standing in front of her pregnant daughter, and a man from a world she had once called worthless, she found herself at a crossroad she had never expected to face. She turned her back to Hajun and Bora, and looked out across the court. "I built this empire," she said. Her voice was not loud now. It was steady, like a river moving deep underground. "I fought wars that lasted longer than human civilizations. I buried enemies whose names the galaxy has forgotten. I did all of this so that my daughter would inherit a throne of strength." She paused. But strength without heart is just violence. The courtiers shifted. Some of them looked confused, others looked shaken. Tasik, who had been pushed to the edge of the crowd, clenched his jaw and said nothing. Queen Yuna turned back to Hajun and Bora. She walked toward them slowly. Each step echoed through the hall like the beat of a drum. She stopped in front of Hajun and looked down at him. He looked up at her. Neither of them flinched. Then the queen did something that no living Valari had ever seen her do. She knelt. Not fully, not on both knees, but she lowered herself just enough to bring her eyes level with Hajun's. It was a sign of acknowledgement in Valari culture, a gesture given only to those considered equals. The entire court gasped. "I do not understand you," she said to him quietly, so that only he and Bora could hear. "I do not understand how something so small can be so unbreakable. But my daughter chose you, and she has never been wrong about anything that mattered." Hajun felt his eyes sting with tears, but he held them back. "Thank you, Your Majesty." The queen looked at Bora. Her daughter's golden eyes were already wet. Yuna reached out and placed a hand on Bora's cheek, the way she used to when Bora was a child, before the crown made everything cold. "You are braver than I ever was," the queen whispered. "You chose love in a world that taught you only power. I am proud of you." Bora let the tears fall. She pressed her face into her mother's hand and closed her eyes. The queen stood up again and turned to the court. Her voice returned to its full strength, filling every corner of the great hall. "Hear me," she commanded. "The human Hajun has shown more courage in this hall today than warriors twice his size and 10 times his age. He stood before me unarmed and unafraid. He spoke not with the voice of a conqueror, but with the voice of someone willing to die for those he loves." She raised her hand. "In the old laws of Valara, a partner of the royal heir must prove themselves worthy through trial. The trial was meant to be one of combat, strength, and endurance. But I say now that there is no greater trial than standing in front of a queen's wrath with nothing but your heart and refusing to break." She looked at Hajun. "Hajun of Earth, you have passed a trial that no Valari has ever faced, and so, by the power of the crown, I name you worthy." The crowd stirred. Whispers turned to murmurs. Murmurs turned to voices. Some of the older courtiers shook their heads in disbelief, but many of the younger ones, the ones who had quietly watched Hajun's patience and kindness over the weeks, began to nod. Bora squeezed Hajun's hand so tightly he thought his fingers might break, but he did not care. The queen was not finished. She walked to her throne and picked up something that had been resting behind it, hidden from view. It was a second crown, smaller than hers, made of silver metal with dark blue stones set into its frame. It was old, ancient even, and it glowed with a soft, gentle light. "This crown," Queen Yuna said, holding it up for all to see, "has not been worn in over 500 years. It was made for the partner of the heir, given only to those who earn the love of Valara's future ruler." She walked back to Ha-Jun and held the crown before him. "Kneel," she said. Ha-Jun looked at Bo-Ra. She smiled at him through her tears and nodded. He knelt. Queen Yuna placed the crown on his head. It was cool against his skin, and the moment it settled, the blue stones flickered to life, glowing softly like tiny stars. The queen stepped back and looked at the court. "Rise," she said. Ha-Jun stood. For a moment, no one moved. The hall was frozen in time. Hundreds of Valari staring at a human wearing a crown that had not been seen in half a millennium. Then a voice broke the silence. It came from the back of the hall, from an old Valari general named Suho, a war hero who had served the Empire for over 300 years. He was tall, scarred, and respected by everyone. He had fought in more battles than most could count, and he never spoke unless his words truly mattered. He stepped forward, looked at Ha-Jun, and said one word: "King." The word hit the air like lightning. Then another voice joined. "King," and another, "King," and another. The sound grew. It spread from the back of the hall to the front, from the old to the young, from the generals to the servants. One by one, every Valari in the room took up the call. It began as a ripple and became a wave that turned into a storm. "King, king, king." The word thundered through the great hall, shaking the walls and rattling the crystal throne. Hundreds of voices united in a single, unstoppable chant. The floor vibrated. The statues of past rulers seemed to tremble. And at the center of it all stood Ha-Jun, a small human from a small world, wearing a crown of stars, holding the hand of the woman he loved. Bo-Ra pressed her forehead to his. Tears ran freely down her face. "They are calling for you," she whispered. Ha-Jun could barely speak. His voice was small against the roar of the crowd, but she heard him. "No," he said softly. "They are calling for us." Queen Yuna watched from beside her throne. She did not join the chanting. She did not need to. Instead, she stood with her arms crossed and her chin raised, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, a small, quiet smile touched her lips. The galaxy would hear about this day. Every planet, every species, every empire would learn how a single human walked into the most powerful court in the known universe with nothing but his voice and his heart, and walked out wearing a crown. Stories would be told, songs would be written, and somewhere, on a small blue planet far away, the people of Earth would hear the news and smile, because it was the most human thing they could imagine. Not winning through war, not conquering through power, but earning a place through love, courage, and the refusal to give up. Ha-Jun looked out over the cheering crowd, the glowing hall, and the vast, beautiful world that was now partly his. He took a deep breath and held Bo-Ra's hand a little tighter. It had been a long road for a small man from a small world, but he had made it, and humanity, as always, had found a way. H1. The Queen roared, "Did you know my daughter is expecting, human?" Then everyone shouted, "King!" H2. Part 4. The Human Stands. The blade still rested against Ha-Jun's chest. The energy humming from its edge made the air vibrate. One push from the Queen's hand, and it would cut through him like paper. Everyone in the Great Hall knew it. Ha-Jun knew it too. But he did not step back. Queen Yuna stared down at him. Her golden eyes were burning, but something behind them had shifted. It was small, barely visible, but it was there. The fire in her gaze had not gone out, but it was no longer pointed only at him. It had turned inward, as if she was now fighting something inside herself. "You stand before me," she said slowly, "with no weapon, no armor, no army at your back. And you tell me you will protect my daughter?" "Yes," Hajun said. "How?" The word came out sharp. "How will you protect her when your bones break like dry wood? How will you fight for her when your body will fail you in 50 short years? How will you stand beside the throne of Valara when the galaxy will see you as nothing more than a pet?" Hajun felt every word like a punch, but he kept his eyes on hers and spoke calmly. "I do not know the answer to all of those questions," he admitted. "But I know this. I did not come to Valara looking for love. I came here to build peace. I came here alone, with nothing but words. And I stayed, even when no one wanted me here. I stayed when they laughed at me. I stayed when they ignored me. I stayed because I believed something good could come from it." He took a breath. "And something good did come from it. Your daughter came to me. Not because I am strong, not because I am powerful. She came because I treated her like a person, not like a crown. I listened to her. I saw her, and I will keep seeing her, every day for as long as I live." Queen Yuna's hand trembled slightly. The blade moved a fraction of an inch, but did not pull away. From the side of the hall, a door opened. The crowd turned, and a wave of murmurs spread through the room. Princess Bo-Ra stepped into the great hall. She was not wearing fine royal clothes. She was not wearing armor. She was dressed simply, her white hair falling loose, and her face was pale, but strong. She walked through the crowd with steady steps, and every Valari in her path moved aside without being asked. She stopped next to Hajun and turned to face her mother. "Mother," she said, her voice was clear and firm. "If you are going to hurt him, then you will have to go through me." The hall erupted in whispers. This was unheard of. A Valari princess standing against the queen, in front of the entire court. It was not just bold, it was a direct challenge to the throne's authority. Queen Yuna's eyes widened. "You dare?" "I dare," Bo-Ra said, "because this is my life. My child, you raised me to be strong, mother. You raised me to never bow to fear. And I am not bowing now." Queen Yuna looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she looked at Hajun, then back at Bo-Ra. "You would choose him," the queen said quietly, "over your empire?" Bo-Ra shook her head. "No, I choose him and the empire, because he makes me stronger, not weaker. He does not take from me. He gives. He gives more than anyone in this court has ever given me." She stepped closer to her mother. "You have ruled this empire with fear and strength for centuries, and you have done it well. But I have watched you sit alone on that throne every night, with no one beside you. No one who sees you as anything more than a queen. Is that what you want for me?" Queen Yuna's expression cracked, just slightly, just enough for those close to see it. Her golden eyes flickered, and for half a second, the mighty queen of the Valari Empire looked like something she had never allowed herself to be. Tired, lonely. Hajun saw it, and he did something no one expected. He turned to the queen, not with defiance, but with softness. He bowed his head, not out of fear, but out of respect. "Your Majesty," he said gently, "you have carried this empire on your back for so long. You have been strong for everyone, but you do not have to carry it alone. Let us help. Let me help, not as an enemy, not as an outsider, but as family." The word hit the room like a bell. Family. A human had just offered to be family to the queen of the most powerful alien empire in the galaxy. Tae-Sik stepped forward from his place near the throne, his face twisted with anger. "Your Majesty, this is a trick. The human is manipulating you. He is using the princess to gain power." "You must. Silence," Queen Yuna said. Tae-Sik froze. The queen turned her eyes on him with a look so cold that the old advisor actually stepped back. "You have been whispering poison into this court for 200 years, Taysik," she said. "You did not bring this matter to me out of loyalty. You brought it to me because you feared losing your own influence." Taysik opened his mouth, but no words came out. Queen Yuna looked at her blade. She looked at Hajun. She looked at Bora, standing tall beside him, with one hand resting gently on her stomach. The hall waited. Slowly the queen lowered the blade. The hum of energy faded. The tip touched the floor, and the sound it made was like the end of a storm. She stood there in silence for a long time, and the entire empire seemed to wait with her. Then she spoke. "When I was young," she said quietly, "my mother told me that the strongest rulers are not the ones who destroy their enemies. They are the ones who know when to stop." She looked at Hajun. "You are not what I wanted for my daughter. You are small. You are fragile. You will die long before she does." Her voice cracked just slightly on the last word. "But you stood in front of me with nothing but your heart, and you did not break." She turned to look at the full court. "In all my years on this throne, I have seen warriors, generals, and kings fall to their knees before me. They begged, they pleaded, they crumbled." She looked back at Hajun, but this human stood. The words hung in the air like the ringing of a great bell. Nobody spoke. The queen's eyes shimmered with something that might have been the beginning of tears, though she would never admit it. Bora reached out and took Hajun's hand. He held it tightly, feeling her fingers wrap around his with that same gentle strength he had come to love. And together, they waited for whatever came next, because whatever it was, they would face it side by side. The queen roared, "Did you know my daughter is expecting, human?" Then everyone shouted, "King!" Part 3, The Queen's Fury. The palace had many eyes. Nothing stayed hidden there for long. It was only a matter of time before the truth about Hajun and Bo-Ra reached the ears of Queen Yuna, and when it did, the entire world of Velera seemed to hold its breath. It began with a report from one of the Queen's personal advisors, a tall and thin Veleri named Taysik. He was old, sharp, and had served the crown for over 200 years. He did not like change. He did not like humans, and he especially did not like the idea of one getting close to the royal bloodline. Taysik walked into the queen's private chamber late one evening and bowed low. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I bring news that requires your immediate attention." Queen Yuna was sitting at a wide table covered in maps and war plans. "Speak. It concerns the human ambassador," Taysik said, "and your daughter." That made the queen look up. Taysik told her everything: the meetings in the garden, the long nights on the balcony, the whispers in the court. And then he told her the one thing that turned the queen's cold expression into pure fire. "Your Majesty," he said, lowering his voice, "Princess Bora has been seen by the royal physician. The results were confirmed this morning. She is carrying a child." The room went cold. Queen Yuna did not scream. She did not shout. She simply stood up from her chair, and the stone table in front of her cracked under the pressure of her hands. Her golden eyes burned so brightly they seemed to glow in the dark room. Her jaw tightened, and every muscle in her body became as hard as iron. "Bring him to me," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a falling mountain. "Bring the human before the full court. Now." Within the hour, every corner of the palace was alive with movement. Courtiers rushed to their places. Advisors lined the walls of the great hall. Soldiers stood at every door. Word spread through the city faster than wind. The queen had called a full court assembly. Something terrible was about to happen. Hajun was pulled from his quarters by 4 guards. They did not hurt him, but their grip was like stone. They said nothing as they marched him through the long hallways toward the great hall. Ha-Jun could feel his heart pounding, but he kept his face calm. He already knew. Somehow, he already knew. When the doors of the great hall opened, the sight before him was terrifying. Hundreds of Valari filled the hall, standing in rows on both sides. Their faces were hard and unreadable. At the far end, sitting on her black crystal throne, was Queen Yuna. She was wearing full battle armor, and her crown seemed to burn with dark energy. Her eyes locked onto Ha-Jun the moment he stepped inside. Bora was nowhere to be seen. Ha-Jun was led to the center of the hall and stopped there. He stood alone in the open space, surrounded by hundreds of beings who were taller, stronger, and older than him. The silence was so thick he could hear his own breathing. Queen Yuna stood from her throne. The sound of her armor shifting echoed through the hall. She walked down the steps slowly, each step heavy and deliberate. When she reached the floor, she walked toward Ha-Jun and stopped just a few feet away. She towered over him. Her shadow swallowed him whole. Then she spoke. "Human," her voice filled the entire hall, bouncing off the walls and ceiling like rolling thunder. "Did you know," she asked, her golden eyes boring into his soul. "Did you know that my daughter is expecting?" The hall exploded with gasps and whispers. Some courtiers stepped back, in shock. Others stared at Ha-Jun with open disgust. Taesik stood near the throne, with a thin, satisfied smile on his face. Ha-Jun did not move. Queen Yuna leaned closer. "My daughter, the heir to the Valari Empire, the blood of 1,000 generations of warriors, leaders, and conquerors. And you, a human, a creature with a lifespan shorter than my sword's history, you dared to touch her." The words hit the air like blades. Every person in the room could feel the queen's rage. It was not just anger. It was centuries of pride, power, and protection pouring out all at once. "Your kind builds with sand," she continued, her voice rising. "You crumble and die while we still stand. And now you have mixed your blood with mine, with the royal house of Valara?" She raised her hand, and a long dark blade appeared in her grip, pulled from the weapon on her back. The edge of the blade hummed with energy. She pointed it directly at Ha-Jun's chest. "Give me one reason," she growled, "why I should not end you here, in front of everyone." The hall was dead silent. Not a single person breathed. Ha-Jun looked at the blade. He looked at the queen's burning eyes. He could feel the heat coming off the weapon, just inches from his heart. His hands were shaking at his sides. His body wanted to run. Every nerve inside him screamed to fall to his knees and beg. But he did not run. He did not kneel. Instead, he closed his eyes for 1 second. And in that second, he thought of Bo-Ra. He thought of her laugh, her golden eyes, the way she pressed her forehead against his, the way she whispered, "Then stay." He opened his eyes, and he stood tall. "Your Majesty," he said. His voice did not shake. "I did know." The hall stirred. Taesik's smile faded. "I knew," Ha-Jun continued, "because your daughter told me herself. She told me with pride. She told me with hope. Not because she is ashamed of what we share, but because she believes in it." Queen Yuna's eyes narrowed. Her grip on the blade tightened. Ha-Jun took 1 step forward. Just one. But that single step made the entire hall gasp. He was now close enough that the tip of the blade touched his chest. "You ask me why you should not end me," he said, looking straight up into the queen's face. "I cannot stop you. I am small. I am weak by your measure. I will not live as long as your memory of this day." He paused. "But if you strike me down, you will not just be killing a human. You will be telling your daughter that her choice does not matter, that her heart does not matter, and you will be telling your grandchild that they were born from something the queen wanted to destroy." The blade did not move. The queen's jaw trembled, not from rage, but from something she had not felt in a very long time. Doubt. Ha-Jun spoke his final words in that moment, and they were steady and clear. I love your daughter, and I will protect her and our child with everything I have, even if everything I have is not enough by your standards. That is what humans do. We do not stop. Even when we are afraid, even when we are small, we do not stop. The great hall held its breath, and the queen stood perfectly still, her blade against the chest of a man who refused to look away. The queen roared, "Did you know my daughter is expecting, human?" Then everyone shouted, "King!" Part 2. The Princess and the Human. The days on Valara were long. Each one lasted nearly 30 hours, and for Ha-Jun, every hour felt like a test. The courtiers ignored him. The advisors avoided him. The guards watched him like he was a prisoner, not a guest. He ate alone. He walked alone. And every time he tried to speak with someone about the peace agreement, they either laughed or turned their backs. But Ha-Jun did not give up. Each morning, he dressed properly, walked to the council chambers, and waited. Sometimes he waited for hours. Sometimes no one came at all. But he always showed up. He always sat in his chair with his back straight and his hands folded, ready to talk whenever anyone was willing to listen. On the 5th day, someone finally came. Ha-Jun was sitting in the palace garden, reading a small book he had brought from Earth. The garden was beautiful, filled with strange glowing flowers and trees with silver leaves. The air smelled sweet, and the sound of water running through crystal streams filled the space with a soft, peaceful music. He heard footsteps behind him and turned. Princess Bora stood there. She was tall, like all Valari, with the same silver-blue skin and golden eyes as her mother. But where Queen Yuna's eyes were hard and sharp, Bora's were softer, warmer. Her white hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and she wore a simple dress instead of armor. She looked at Ha-Jun with the same curiosity she had felt on his first day. "You are the human," she said. It was not a question. Ha-Jun stood up quickly and bowed. "Yes, Your Highness, my name is Ha-Jun." "You bow a lot." "It is a way of showing respect where I come from," Ha-Jun said with a small smile. Bora looked at him for a moment, then sat down on the stone bench across from him, as if she had decided something. "Everyone in this palace thinks you are a fool for staying," she said directly. "They say you will leave within the week." Ha-Jun sat back down slowly. "What do you think, Your Highness?" Bora studied him. "I think a fool would not have answered my mother the way you did on the first day." Ha-Jun smiled a little. "Or maybe only a fool would." For the first time, Bora laughed. It was a small sound, quick and quiet, but it was real. Ha-Jun noticed that a few nearby servants turned their heads in surprise, as if they had never heard the princess laugh before. From that day on, Bora began visiting Ha-Jun regularly. At first, it was just short conversations in the garden. She asked him about Earth. What did humans eat? Why did they live such short lives and still try to do so much? Ha-Jun answered every question honestly, without trying to make humans sound better or stronger than they were. "We are not powerful," he told her one evening, as the purple sky turned dark above them. "We are not the fastest or the strongest. We do not live long, but we feel deeply. We love hard, and we never stop trying, even when we know we will fail." Bora was quiet for a long time after that. In return, she told him about Valara. She told him about the weight of being a princess in an empire that valued strength above all things. She told him how every decision she made was watched and judged, how she was expected to be like her mother, cold, powerful, and untouchable. She told him that she had never been allowed to simply be herself. "Everyone sees the crown," she said softly. "No one sees me." Ha-Jun looked at her and said, "I see you." Bora met his eyes, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. But something passed between them in that silence, something that did not need words. As the weeks went on, their meetings became longer. Heijun taught Bo-Ra simple human games. He showed her how to fold paper into small shapes, a thing humans called origami. She was fascinated by it. Her large hands were clumsy at first, but she kept trying until she could make a small paper bird. She held it in her palm and looked at it like it was the most precious thing she had ever received. Heijun, in turn, learned about Valari art and music. Bo-Ra played a stringed instrument that made sounds so deep and beautiful they seemed to shake the air itself. When she played, Heijun would close his eyes and listen, and she would watch him with a look that grew softer each time. The court began to notice. Whispers spread through the palace like fire. The princess was spending time with the human. The princess was laughing with the human. The princess was seen walking with the human under the silver trees at night. Some courtiers were disgusted. A human, with the heir to the Valari throne? It was unthinkable. Others were simply confused. What could the princess possibly see in such a small, short-lived creature? But no one dared say anything to Bo-Ra directly. She was, after all, still the daughter of Queen Yuna. One night, Heijun and Bo-Ra sat together on the highest balcony of the palace, looking out over the glowing city below. The stars above were bright and countless, and the air was cool and still. "Heijun," Bo-Ra said quietly, "what happens when a human finds someone they want to stay with?" Heijun looked at her. His heart was beating fast, but his voice was steady. "They tell them. Even if they are afraid, even if the world says no, they tell them because life is too short to be silent." Bo-Ra turned to face him fully. Her golden eyes shimmered under the starlight. "Then tell me," she whispered. Heijun reached out and took her hand. It was much larger than his, and her skin was cool and smooth, but her fingers curled gently around his, with a tenderness that no amount of strength could replace. "I want to stay with you," he said. "Not because of your crown, not because of your empire, because of you, just you." Bo-Ra closed her eyes and pressed her forehead against his. In Valari culture, this was deeper than any kiss. It meant trust. It meant surrender. It meant choosing someone above all else. "Then stay," she whispered back. And so the human and the princess made a promise to each other under the stars, knowing full well that the road ahead would not be easy. The empire would resist, the court would fight it, and the queen, the most powerful being on Valara, would burn the sky with her anger. But neither of them cared, because for the first time in their lives, they had both found something worth fighting for. And that something was each other. The queen roared, "Did you know my daughter is expecting human?" Then everyone shouted, "King." Part 1. The Unlikely Ambassador. The ship was small and old. It made ugly sounds every time it moved through space. Heijun sat inside it alone, looking out the window at the massive planet growing larger and larger in front of him. The planet was called Valara. It was the heart of the Valari Empire, one of the most powerful alien civilizations in the known galaxy. And Heijun was going there to talk peace. He was not a soldier. He was not a general. He was just a man who was good with words. Back on Earth, he had worked as a translator and later became a junior diplomat. He was quiet, polite, and had a habit of smiling even when things were bad. The people who sent him on this mission did not expect much. In fact, most of them believed he would fail. Some of them believed he would die. The Valari were not kind to outsiders. They were tall, powerful beings, with silver blue skin and golden eyes. Their bodies were strong enough to crush stone with bare hands. They lived for hundreds of years, and because of this, they looked down on species with short lives. Humans, to them, were nothing more than insects, weak, breakable, forgettable. Hajun knew all of this. He had read every report, every warning, and every failed diplomatic file from the last 30 years. 12 ambassadors had gone to Valara before him. None of them had lasted more than 10 days. Some were sent back in silence. Others were never heard from again. Still, Hajun did not turn the ship around. When the ship landed on the surface, the air hit him first. It was thick and warm, with a sweet smell like flowers mixed with metal. The sky above was purple, and the ground beneath his feet was smooth like glass. Everything on Valara looked like it had been carved by artists. The buildings were tall and beautiful, covered in gold and silver markings. The streets were wide and clean. It was a world built by beings who believed they were above everyone else. 2 Valari guards were waiting for him at the landing zone. They were both over 7 feet tall, dressed in dark armor, and carrying long-bladed weapons on their backs. They looked at Hajun the way someone might look at a small bug on the ground. "You are the human?" one of them asked. His voice was deep and cold. Hajun bowed his head slightly. "Yes, my name is Hajun. I have come on behalf of Earth to speak with Queen Yuna." The guards looked at each other. One of them laughed. It was not a friendly laugh. "Follow," the other guard said, turning around without waiting. Hajun followed them through the streets. Valari citizens stopped to stare at him. Some whispered, some pointed. A few children ran closer to look at him, and then ran back, giggling. To them, he was something strange and small, a creature from a weak world that had only recently started traveling between stars. Hajun kept his eyes forward and his back straight. He did not show fear. He had learned long ago that fear was like blood in water. Once others could smell it, they would never stop circling. The palace of Queen Yuna was at the center of the capital city. It was enormous. The doors alone were taller than any building Hajun had ever seen on Earth. They were made of dark metal and covered in symbols that glowed faintly. When the doors opened, the sound echoed like thunder. Inside, the palace was even more grand. The walls were lined with statues of past rulers, each one looking more powerful and proud than the last. The floor was made of white stone that reflected light like a mirror. And at the far end of the great hall, sitting on a throne made of black crystal, was Queen Yuna. She was terrifying. Queen Yuna was tall even for a Valari. Her silver-blue skin seemed to glow under the light, and her golden eyes burned like small suns. Her hair was long and white, pulled back behind a crown made of sharp, dark metal. She wore armor even on her throne, as if she was always ready for war. Her face showed no warmth, no welcome, only power. Around her stood dozens of courtiers and advisors, all dressed in fine clothing, all watching Hajun like he was a dead man walking. Hajun stopped in the middle of the hall and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," he said clearly, "I am Hajun, sent by the United Earth Council. I come with respect and with hope for peace between our people." The hall was silent for a long moment. Then Queen Yuna spoke. Her voice was like stone grinding against stone. "Peace," she repeated. The words sounded like a joke in her mouth. "Your people send me a single man with no army, no ships, and no power. And you speak of peace?" Hajun straightened up and looked at her. "That is exactly why I was sent alone, Your Majesty. Peace does not need armies. It only needs someone willing to listen." A few of the courtiers whispered among themselves. Some looked annoyed. Others looked curious. Queen Yuna leaned forward on her throne and narrowed her eyes. "Humans live for what? 70, 80 years? You are like candles. You burn and then you are gone. Why should I waste my time listening to a creature who will be dust before my next century begins?" Hajun did not look away. "Because sometimes, Your Majesty, a short flame burns the brightest." The hall went completely still. No one moved. No one breathed. Queen Yuna stared at him for a long time. Then she leaned back on her throne. "You may stay," she said, her voice flat and cold. "But do not mistake my patience for kindness, human. The moment you waste my time, you will leave this world the same way the others did." Ha-Jun bowed again. "Thank you, Your Majesty." As the guards led him away to his quarters, Ha-Jun let out a slow breath. His hands were shaking inside his pockets, but his face was calm. He had survived the first meeting. That was more than most humans had managed. But deep inside the palace, in a room above the Great Hall, someone else had been watching. Princess Bora stood near her window, looking down at the small human walking across the courtyard below. She tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes filled not with disgust or amusement, but with something rare in the Valari court. Curiosity. She whispered to herself, "Interesting," and that single word would change the future of the entire empire.